Good evening. Welcome, and thank you to Anu and Tom for hosting us in your lovely yard. Can't imagine a better place for great conversation and a brilliant lecture. I'm UC Santa Cruz Chancellor Cynthia LaRive, and I'm so glad that you could join us tonight for the Sidhartha Maitra Memorial Lecture. Tonight's lecture is a really special one. It's the first time we've had a lecture here at this beautiful home of Anu Luther Maitra and her husband Thomas Kalaith. And I thank you. It's not mine. Okay. I thought I turned off my ringer. It's bad form to interrupt yourself, but so luckily I'm spared. Anyway, thank you, Anu and Tom, for hosting us here. It's just wonderful to be here with you all this evening. The Maitra Lecture is one of our premier lecture series at UC Santa Cruz. It has brought renowned thinkers to our campus, enriching the intellectual life of our campus and the greater community, and we're so glad that you could join us this evening. This is a moment when we can all come together to deeply consider issues of our time, and importantly, do so from the humanist perspective. Over the years, the Maitra Series speakers have offered us great insights on a host of topics. Lectures have included writers, academics, scientists, artists, a Nobel laureate, economists, and Janet Yellen, former U.S. Treasury Secretary and one-time chair of the Federal Reserve. Amartya Sen, the Indian economist and philosopher, has also been a speaker. And there have been, of course, adding to this every year, and we're so pleased to have our speaker with us tonight. There are a number of people that we owe thanks to for this series. Kiran and Arjun Malhotra's generous gift established the endowment that has supported this series for more than 2 decades. And of course, we have deep gratitude for Anu Luther, an entrepreneur and businesswoman. Anu has been such a great friend to UC Santa Cruz, and she's currently a member of our UC Santa Cruz Foundation Board, our foundation trustees, and she's a former president of our foundation. She taught economics for us, and she launched this series to honor her late husband, Sid Maitra. Sid was a scientist, an entrepreneur, and a philanthropist of great vision, and he had deep appreciation for the humanities, an appreciation I think we all share. This lecture series is a wonderful legacy in that it preserves Sid's memory while expanding our horizons. So please join me in welcoming Anu Luther, who will tell you more about the lecture series and about tonight's distinguished speaker. Anu?
Thank you, Chancellor. This is an easy introduction for me to make. When you are an econ professor at MIT, when you've co-founded one of its kind Poverty Action Lab to alleviate one of the most intractable, heart-rending concerns of our time, and when you won the Nobel Prize, there's not much else that needs to be said. Except that, in recent days, Abhijit has published 2 marvelous cookbooks, Cooking to Save Your Life and Chonk, both illustrated by Cheyenne Olivier, who is with us today. So please, if you have an opportunity, engage with her. Abhijit and Cheyenne are also collaborating on projects of Jamdani weaving, a craft hundreds of years old that originally used the finest muslins and employed ancient techniques and patterns of Bengal to produce a magically sheer fabric coveted by Mughal and later a European aristocracy. A cotton fabric so soft, so light, so fine that it was hard to believe that human hands had made it. But today, under the same ancient stars, Abhijit will speak to us about global poverty that afflicts millions today, including the Jamdani weavers of Bengal, Bangladesh, and West Bengal. It is a subject that won for him and his wife, Esther Duflo, and their colleague, Michael Kremer, the 2019 Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences. It is also a most appropriate topic for a lecture in memory of my late Bengali husband, Sidhartha Maitra, when Sid and I would have an argument that seemed to have no end or resolution. He would often abruptly terminate the discussion to do one of two things. He'd pull me outside to point to the night sky and say, "Anu, just let's look at the stars and remember how tiny we are." Or, if it happened to be daytime, he had another tactic. He'd pull out a picture book, The Rickshawalas of Calcutta, so we could flip through it together and understand how miserable life could be on this planet and how fortunate we were. Cosmic perspective and terrestrial connectedness. It might seem a bit precious to discuss poverty in Atherton, the capital of Silly Valley's VC world. But I don't believe that anyone here thinks that it is okay to have a world of giga yachts and dynasty trusts, apocalypse insurance through private bunkers, and New Zealand citizenship, Anita Ambani wearing the GNP of Pakistan around her neck at her son's wedding, one that, according to rumor, cost $500 million. Geez, even Jeff spent only $50 million. When 800 million people, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, live in extreme poverty, that is on less than $3 a day. But it is true that the scale and the complexity of the problem is so large, and the detail of how it translates into the lives of millions of people can be so disturbing that it is not surprising for us to feel numbed and overwhelmed into inaction. Abhijit and Esther begin their book, Poor Economics, with that very kind observation. But I was inspired by the video of a public presentation of Abhijit in which he traced trends in global inequality, of which extreme poverty is the most distressing feature. He talked about the legitimization of social inequality, founded on the idea that there is a trade-off between equity and growth, and robust growth would eventually lead to a trickle-down of benefits. This notion has been empirically contradicted in both cross-sectional and intertemporal studies, but the idea endures and may be responsible for our unblinking acceptance of CEO to median worker compensation ratios that are a mind-boggling 300 to 1 today compared to 30 to 1 in 1980. Yes, it was Reagan who started it all. I have been away from the discipline for a long time, so Abhijit, I hope I get it all right in terms of interpreting how wonderful your work is. I came of age in economics at a time when models ruled. A set of selected variables and relationships among them that one hope captures some aspect of the real world. At the Delhi School of Economics, my own specialization was mathematical economics and econometrics, which I studied under Shukamoy Chakravarti, Amartya Sen, A.L. Nagar, three of the all-time giants of our discipline. Of course, we knew that models were simplifications of a complex real world. The way we dealt with that was to build in an allowance for errors, exceptions, departures. As warranted, these models got extended, refined, modified over time. But in the design of policy, the concept of the model ruled. Even the messier subfield of development economics that concerned itself with the special circumstances of countries at the bottom of the per capita income table, where most of the extremely poor live, models dominated the runway. Any necessary data massaging was messy work, but was left to clerks. And separating causation from correlation was an infernal problem for our statistical models. Abhijit, Esther, and Michael changed all that, and it seems to me almost overnight. From the medical sciences, they borrowed the idea of RCTs, randomized controlled trials, and applied it to the economic sciences in a perfect blend of theory and data analysis. Through JPAL, MIT's Jamil Poverty Action Lab, they got the opportunity to test their ideas in field trials. The smashing success of these experiments led to a paradigm shift in the field of development economics. Their brilliant insight was to recognize that the catch-all thing called errors contained much valuable information, and in the design of policy, this could be teased out through RCTs. And bewildering poverty issues could be successfully addressed through specific and relatively simple interventions. The idea of RCTs is simple enough. To evaluate the effectiveness of a policy intervention, you choose two largely similar groups, apply the intervention in one group, and not use it in the other, and you observe the differential impact of the policy on these two groups. Abhijit et al. Upended the game by building in randomization into decision making. Plus, the very design of the experiment was such that there was little confusion about causality. Of course, the devil lurks in the sophisticated detail of experiment design. There are three identifying elements of their approach to the study of poverty. First, really understand the lives of the poor. Live with them, talk to them, listen to them. Know, for example, that they are not creatures different from us. They too can feel overwhelmed, perhaps more justifiably, by the circumstances of their life, and thus may act in ways that we don't interpret as economically rational. Abhijit and Esther exhibit what I can only call academic empathy, a rare and wonderful addendum to the purely clinical approach taken by practitioners of the really dismal science of poverty economics. Second, take small steps one at a time in what is obviously the right direction and evaluate every time before proceeding to the next step. This is an approach I have been seeing increasingly applied to vastly different problems that are getting increasingly complex. Amartya Sen, in his idea of justice, argues for making practical moves in the direction of that which is more fair, rather than asking Rawlsian questions about what is the fairest of them all. Dr. Abhijit, who I think was supposed to be here but is not, maybe he's saving a life, is using Toyota's PDSA, Plan, Do, Study, Act methods at Sutter Health. Iterative cycles to test changes on a small scale so as to achieve continuous improvements in productivity. Third, be willing to experiment and stay open to altering course. To me, their general approach has elements of almost a guide to living, and it has a Buddhist Socratic feel to it, only appropriate since these and other enduring philosophies and religions emerged in what is known as the Axial Age, one that was characterized by uncommon violence and uncertainty. Abhijit warns us about the dangers of the three I's in economics: ignorance, ideology, inertia. Well, Abhijit, I have an acronym for you for what you have accomplished. You have come up with the antidote: a perfect use case. U for understand, S for small steps, and E for experiment. And whoa, it's the simple dal, the most basic dish of Indian cooking, but one that sets apart the best Indian cooks. Bravo. Talking of food, I'd like to acknowledge our amazing UCSC catering team, headed by Tracy and Allison. They subliminally incorporated Abhijit's wisdom into the food we had today. They read his two cookbooks to understand the cuisine and orient their sensibilities. They took baby steps in their kitchen all week to move their California recipes in the AB direction, and they experimented. UCSC folks, you have helped me bevel the shards of a shattering that happened 25 years ago. There is a special events team. Kristen, I think Kristen has been here with us since my first Mitra lecture, delivered by Vikram Seth. Kristen, Nicole, Paulina, Juan, and John, thank you very much. You've been working with me for so many years, and I'm very, very grateful. Cindy, I feel you're a soul sister, except for that one time when you shoved people off the campus. Mark, Laurie, I don't see Laurie. I think ex-provost was supposed to be here, but Mark, Laurie, so many others, Priya et al. You have, it's just, what this partnership that we have is absolutely, absolutely heartwarming, and I am very, very grateful. Friends, Arjun and Kiran, who started it and come every year, along with many others that I see here today, yet again and again, every year they've come. I think Sonia and Shobda have come every year, maybe even Jyoti and Amita, but thank you so much for coming through all these years. Krishna, I forgot Krishna. How could I? Papa, at 102, you inspire me every day with your engagement in and enjoyment of life. Thank you. Tom, what generosity you show. What generosity and love you show me, supporting me in an enterprise to remember my first husband. And finally, at the personal level, those for whom I am doing this. My children, Sonali and Aditya, Sonali is here, so that they can remember in detail and color their father, and those who I want to help imagine what he was like. Julio, my son-in-law, my other son-in-law, Patrick, my grandchildren, Ryan, Rafa, Taj, Mari, Noah, and a new baby on his way into our family. So thank you all very much. And with that, I would like to invite Abhijit and
Thank you, Anu. Thank you very much for that. That's really marvelous. You made our work more, maybe more dramatic and certainly more colorful than I've ever imagined it to be. Thank you. And thank you, Cindy, for inviting me, and Tom for opening your house to us. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Anu asked me to give this lecture. I looked at the people who had given this lecture, and I realized that I had nothing to say that's going to quite measure up. I mean, when you start with Vikram said, it's a hard challenge. So I decided I'll stay in my relatively narrow space, talk about something that is at least very concrete, and therefore spares me the need to be particularly articulate or imaginative. This about 15 years ago, we wrote a book called Poor Economics. We wrote the book with no sense of that anyone would particularly want to read it, but it turned out to be, it won many awards, and it won even the Best Business Book of the Year award, which for the book, a book on the lives of the extreme poor is an odd designation at best. But nonetheless, it won many prizes, and we sort of were surprised by the reaches it has had, and largely because I think we had no sense of, we'd never written a book before, so it was something both new and a little bit of a gamble for us. But I think in that process, I think to write that book, we had to do a bit more of something that we usually say people shouldn't do, which is we had to extrapolate. There was, you want to talk about the lives of the poor. We had set up the Jameel Poverty Action Lab in 2003. This is 2009 we started to write. So in 2009, we knew something more than we knew in 2003, but not a hell of a lot. It's the kind of thing that Poverty Action Lab used to have 8 professors when it was set up in 2008. Now it has 1,200 and something and growing. And so the work has grown exponentially, and as a result, we actually do know more things now, many more things now. But at the point where we wrote it, we went out on a limb, and there was no choice because there wasn't really that much else to do. But we thought that it was still worth telling, kind of making a set of guesses. Partly, I think the great advantage of making guesses is you could be wrong. It allows us to at least test something. Unless you make a guess, you can always be right, because ex post we all know the answers to everything. So the advantage of saying something in print is that you face the embarrassment of getting it wrong, but on the other hand, you might have got it right. So the entire exercise we went through a year ago or a year and a half ago now was to look through the book and think of, what did we get right, what did we get wrong, what did we get half right, and what did we completely miss. And we decided, and our publishers agreed, that it would be nice to try to kind of pin that down a bit. So we wrote, in Sala, where I was yesterday, they were selling the new edition of the book, which just came out this month. It is the second revised edition. It's about 80 pages more than the previous one. There's an opening chapter which talks about all the things that we got wrong and right, and the closing chapter about things we didn't talk about. So what I want to do is little bit give you a flavor of that exercise. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to walk you through 5 examples which get some place in that text. Each of these examples highlights some insight that either we missed or we got right, and it gives, I think, it gets a sense of less, I think, of the overall book, which is difficult to do all, than of a sense of the practice, of how one learns, how knowledge kind of progresses through these steps of, making a guess, getting it right or wrong, then updating the guess. So it's more, what I'm going to attempt to do is less kind of telling you about, this is how we solve poverty, than to give you a sense of this is maybe the game we play. This is how knowledge gets generated, and these are potentially maybe some of these are maybe more interesting than others. But the examples per se you should see as being just examples, but they have the advantage of sort of giving a richness to this exercise of generating knowledge, giving it texture maybe. So, as I said, we went out on a limb on many things. The whole book is like, if you like, I don't know what the right metaphor is. If you constantly go out on a limb, at some point you fall out of the tree. And so it's a complicated metaphor. But we were going out on a limb in every direction. It was, and I would say, we got some things surprisingly right, more right than we had any reason to expect, some things embarrassingly wrong, and some things just turned out to be more complex, detailed, interesting than I had expected. So the first topic, which is actually highlighted, is the beginning of the book, is nutrition. And nutrition, of course, is like a classic of the poverty literature. When you talk about the poor, there is almost a way to those words get equated. The very poor don't have enough to eat, and the point that we made in that chapter is that that's sometimes a bit confusing, because the premise that people don't have enough to eat is sort of the idea that if they had some more money, they would spend all of it on more food. And we observed that there were many studies where they studied what happened when they compared mostly. They were, as Anu said, these were correlational studies mostly, but there are tons of them, looking at by many distinguished scholars, Nobel Prize winners, looking at what happens when poor people get richer, or people you compare either poor people with slightly less poor people or the same person over time, and you see what happens to their how much they spend on nutrition. And the bottom line from that whole literature was that people tend to be relatively, they don't really react very much. They get richer, they don't improve nutrition. They increase their spending on food more or less proportionally, but most of the increased spending actually goes towards tastier foods. Nutrition doesn't improve, but eating improves maybe, and even eating doesn't improve so much. So and that's sort of, there's a tension between that idea and the idea that people are starving and therefore they want more nutrients. There was a kind of mechanical model of the poor, which is that the poor are hungry. Those words are often used interchangeably, and therefore if they got a chance they should take more food. But in fact, the evidence suggested they didn't. And we give an example in the book of a guy who keeps saying he's hungry, and then we walk into his house and there's a television there. And he explains that, he says literally, television is more important than food. So so we make this point in the book. We say that we are going to from this what it tells us is that if we think that giving people food subsidies, so most, like the Indian food subsidy, the public distribution system, what it does is it says you get X kilos of food at a lower than market price. Now, since X is always less than the amount you eat, that's really not so much a subsidy to food as such. It's just an income subsidy, because you'll be spending the extra. Imagine you get 15 kilos at $5, but you actually buy 20 kilos. Then the last 5 kilos you're buying at the market price. Your decision is really, shall I buy the last 5 kilos or not? And so in that sense, the subsidy is mostly a subsidy to income rather than to food. Now you might decide that the government is telling me to eat some food and therefore I should buy some, but mostly people didn't find that there was much of a what's often in the US called a flypaper effect. It's not that people just, because you tell them to eat more, they eat more. So basically what the evidence suggested that to us, we said, look, if that is the case, then food subsidies don't really do very much to improve nutrition, because I said two things. One is, as incomes go up, people don't seem to spend more of it on food. And second, a food subsidy especially one that subsidizes a part of your diet, is really an income subsidy, and therefore, again, it doesn't really, it doesn't, if income subsidies don't have big effects on nutrition, then we should not be very optimistic on improving nutrition by making food subsidies available. So this was a proposition. It was criticized, and it was wrong. We got it wrong. Interestingly, we got it wrong for a reason which I think none of us understood, which is that the reason why people thought that, well, if people are spending 40% of their the marginal rupee on food, then if they get even more, they're going to spend an even lower fraction, because if food is a priority and now you're spending on other things, then you've kind of finished the priority. So, but in fact that wasn't true. We didn't understand the priorities very well. And I say this because the whole point of the book, in a sense, is to highlight the fact that we're not very good at, we're willing to, when we theorize we throw out the behavioral models of the poor, we do it kind of willy-nilly, without really having any deep psychological understanding. Now, it turns out that, if anything, all the evidence, there's a lot of evidence now which suggests that and there evidence from randomized controlled trials, so not correlational, where if you give the poor some extra money, then the extra money is more likely to be spent on food than the first money they have. The first money might go into buying a television, but then they buy food. And we hadn't quite squared that. The fact that they buy the television, they think the television is important, the next dollars go into food. And that's now solidly established, that you see quite high estimates of the response to money if you give people extra money, then they spend it on food. So nutrition actually improves substantially, and in fact, in many of the cases, a 1% increase a 10% increase in income increases food consumption by more than 10%. So they're really moving towards food. So it's somehow the status of food in people's thinking we had not understood well. And that's, given my obsession with food, I should have at least got that one right, but no, we didn't. So, but it's good news, and one thing that, so this is, as I said, there are many estimates, but for example, Give Directly is an organization based at UCSD, actually, or in California. The principals are based a bit at UCSD, and they do lots of randomized controlled trials of cash gifts. And what they find is, in fact, that the $1 increase, 1% increase in total earnings increases food consumption by $1.20. $100. Let me say it properly. 1% increase increases food consumption by 1.2%. So, in other words, it's really powerful. The extra money is really powerful, and we see that in maybe unexpectedly, we do start to see that as the poorest Indian population gets richer, we do see a reduction in stunting rates. So something is being transmitted, and something is being transmitted presumably because these extra dollars after the first dollars rupees are actually more likely to get into food spending than we expected. So that's both good news, and it's important. I think, as I said, there is some different interpretations of this. One is, I think that gender is the reason, so the cash transfers to women. The evidence doesn't support that. There are actually cash transfers where the money is either randomized to go to the female member of the family or the male member, and we don't find any difference there in the spending, actually, so surprisingly. Again, we expected that and didn't get it right. There's also some the idea that maybe what's going on is that people, there's a lot of talk of spending on nutrition. Maybe the talk is doing a lot of work. Maybe it's not the money, but the money comes with a lot of talk. But again, there doesn't seem to be. It seems to be true even in programs like that of Give Directly, which is kind of ideologically committed to not say anything. So no nudges whatsoever. So it doesn't seem to be that. The most plausible hypothesis is that the cash transfer makes people more optimistic, that they actually think, okay, life isn't as bad as it used to be. So I don't need all the, maybe I can invest a bit more. I can be a bit more forward-looking, rather than just saying, look, everything sucks. I'll just have that pakora. It seems that that's what we got wrong. But I think it was a sharp hypothesis. It was a pessimistic one, and it turned out we were too pessimistic, and that things work better. Then another place where I think we got it partly right and partly wrong, is that microfinance. When we wrote the book, this was early 2000s, was the high age of microfinance. If you were an insider in this area, which we were, we confronted with people who would tell you that microfinance will solve HIV or whatever. You can pick your problem and it will solve. And we were justly, I think, skeptical, but there was this whole kind of this sense of we finally found the magic bullet, and and sadly, for a long time there were no reliable studies because the microfinance community was very resistant to doing a randomized controlled trial. They basically, I remember going from microfinance institution to microfinance institution at UP, and everybody telling me, first refusing to meet, second telling me that we don't need we know that it works. So they all knew that it works. So in any case, it took a while before there was a randomized controlled trial, but we did one in India, then there was a bunch more. And the first order fact, which we say in poor economics, which became clear, and this is just around 2009 or 10 that the results are coming out, is that at the median, there is almost no effect. People don't get richer, their consumption doesn't improve, their children's education doesn't improve, all kinds of everything, the mental health doesn't improve, you name it, it doesn't change. They might do something. It's not that the money is useless. They take the money, they buy a refrigerator with it, so they have more refrigerators maybe, but it's not that their income goes up. When you buy a refrigerator, you have a refrigerator. You don't have, income doesn't go up necessarily. So the results were relatively stable and relatively depressing, and we got yelled at a lot. But it was, I think, at this level we got it clearly right. I'm going to skip all this statistics. I want to say we were trying to be, I think, we're trying to be even-handed, and we tried to be very clear that we were not saying that microfinance was not a useful thing. You can be useful without making people richer. When I borrow money to buy a house, I become poorer, but I'm happy because I have a house. It's not, you take loans not to get richer, but to get buy things you want to buy. However, what is I think it's worth pointing out is that there were two things we didn't understand. One was that because we had done the studies at the level of villages or communities, it turned out that money, for the usual Keynesian reasons, has effects. Just money in the hands of people. So people, when they have money, they spend money, they buy, refrigerators, or they get their house repaired, or they get a carpenter to come and build them furniture. That, of course, creates demand for the services of people in the neighborhood, and those people start to buy other things, and so on. And so in other words, while the people who get the loan don't get richer, everybody else around it do benefit from it. So that's the first thing we missed. And two of my PhD students eventually show in a very nice paper that when microfinance was cancelled in Andhra Pradesh due to a government policy, the whole district, and not just the borrowers, everyone else actually got hurt. And that's evidence of this kind of demand spillover. The second, and maybe equally interesting thing that we had missed, is that because we didn't have enough data, we couldn't tell that the people maybe at the very top of the wealth distribution were actually benefiting. Who were these people specifically? It was people who already had a business. So a lot of people set up a business to basically, because microfinance gives them a loan, they set up a business, the business generates a small amount of income with which they pay down the loan. It doesn't change their income. But then there were some people who actually had a business before. There were really people who wanted to start a business. And for those people, you do see, as the data accumulates, especially we keep following them over many years, we start to see that those people do benefit. And we see big gains for a small proportion. So in other words, the world is not one of everybody is a potential entrepreneur, just give them credit and they'll start a great business. It's a small proportion of the population are talented entrepreneurs. They are underserved by credit markets. If you give them more money, then they do expand their business, and you do start to see that the number of people employed by them after 7 years actually does go up. So they start to expand their business quite substantially, and so again, it was a piece of good news that was kind of buried inside the data, and we had missed that. The third thing we discussed at some length in poor economics, with essentially a lot of beautiful models and nice curves, but no data, or almost no data, are poverty traps. Poverty traps is the idea that people are poor because they're poor. Because if you are poor, you cannot invest, and if you cannot invest, you can't get out of poverty. And there was and it's not an easy thing to demonstrate. Why? Because of course, what you're trying to demonstrate is that the proof of a poverty trap is that if I give somebody who's poor a certain amount of money or a loan, then he will be permanently lifted out of poverty. But what does permanently mean? In 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? I mean, it's all kind of a bit of a, it's in the end, you have to sort of take some guess at what's good enough. So At that point, there was really no evidence. Since then, so we were tracking this program for a long time. This is a program that was invented by the Bangladeshi NGO, great Bangladeshi NGO called BRAC. It's targeted to the poorest of the poor. What it does is it gives them a package which includes an asset. It's a gift, not a loan. It's a gift of an asset, some amount of training. If you have a cow, they teach you that the cow needs to be vaccinated. If you have trinkets, they teach you where to go buy trinkets so that you buy the trinkets and resell them. So they give you some training and they give you some temporary cash assistance. And we did randomized control trials in 7 countries. And the thing that's striking, is that in most countries this had after 1.5 or 3 years, these people, at that point, these people were on their own. They're not being helped in any way, but they were substantially richer. We keep tracking them. After 17 years, so we've been tracking them for 17 years. 17 years later, the people who got the asset are 30 to 40%, 40% richer in consumption per head, 30% richer in income per head. And in fact, this difference between them and the control group has grown. So in other words, of course, one can't say that they were in a poverty trap, they're now out. Because of course, one day they might still fall back. But at least in terms of showing evidence of a durable effect of a one-time intervention, this was an example of that. We helped these people once in 2009, 2007. In 2024, 17 years later, they are 40% richer. These were randomly selected people who are 40% richer. So in other words, on the question of poverty trap, I think this and some other pieces of evidence suggest that it is possible to make have durable effects on the lives of people. That's in many ways a very exciting proposition, because it's in this, especially in this this right now is not a very optimistic time for the world of development economics, but as a guess about something that does make us feel more optimistic, the fact that very poor people, so many of these people, I'll give you an example to suggest who are the people who are now that much richer, was one of these women, I remember very vividly. She had chosen, they were allowed to choose which asset they take. She took the asset of selling trinkets. So the guy from the NGO took her to the market, showed her where you buy trinkets. She bought trinkets. She came back to her village. She vended them, went to house, sold them. Then, once she had run out of them, she wanted to buy. After a couple of days, she called the guy who had helped her and said, "Look, you told you told me to go to the market to buy the trinkets, but the number, the yellow bus never came." So he said, "What yellow bus?" He said, "Well, I got her a yellow bus, and that's how I got to the market." He said, "Well, no, it's a number 31 bus." I'm making up the number. And so she didn't know how to read. She didn't know that buses have numbers. So that's where these people come out of. So I think it's remarkable that some of these people who have never had a chance, who were, widowed at 17 or abandoned at 19 with 3 children, who had never had either an education or any exposure to the labor market, and now the people who are 40% richer. It's also striking that they're not richer because of that bloody cow that they got 17 years ago. That cow has been long sold, and is presumably in cow heaven. What happened was that with the incomes from the cow, they started other businesses, non-agricultural businesses, non-farming businesses, and the earnings from that was propelling them to over all these years. So that given how poor these people were, we feel, I think, very vindicated that there is this idea of poverty traps has some leverage. Education is another place where I think we got it right, but we didn't, I think, understand what we were getting right. So I'll explain. That sounds cryptic, but hopefully less cryptic after I say. So what we said in poor economics is that there are many things we can rule out from the data already in what's going wrong with education. But what's the problem with education? Children are in school, but they're not actually learning. Learning levels are, they've improved a little bit recently, but basically half of class 5 is at class 2 level in math and reading. So these kinds of numbers, it's not because, and I think there are enough studies showing it's not because of malnutrition, it's not because the school infrastructure was not good, not because there were no qualified teachers. All of these, there were randomized control trials. They were not because there were not charts, not because there were no textbooks. There were all kinds of randomized control trials, all failing to improve quality. But I think one thing that's said is that that's not what's going on. So we had made the guess, based on some successes, that the problem was over-ambitious curricula. That basically children are not, if a child falls behind in grade 1, he doesn't get grade 1 teaching anymore. He gets grade 2 teaching. And when he's in grade 4, he gets history, but he can't read, so he's not getting a lot of history. So the fact that there is not, so the idea of a teaching at the right level is something that we had emphasized in this book. There were some randomized control trials, mostly with this wonderful NGO called Pratham, which showed that if you actually pulled kids out and said, okay, we're going to group kids by what they can do rather than which age they have or what grade they are in, then they progress quite fast. You can just, if you taught people what they don't know, they learn. That's not surprising. There's no rocket science here, but it is actually useful to focus on, missing skills, and you actually address the missing skill, children learn. So there was fair amount of evidence of different kinds on this. But I think there are two parts of what we were saying, and I think now I feel that we didn't fully understand what we were seeing. So one is that the teaching is essentially neutral to the child. The child might be doing anything. The child might have certain skills and not others, but the teaching doesn't really leverage that. And I think that thought, I think we have now much better evidence of. And I think there are two versions of that evidence. I'll tell you a little bit about that. One is that there's Esther and a Harvard child psychologist did a set of studies in Delhi showing that if children in Delhi, in the slums, if you give them, so these are children who are like 3 and 4, you give them non-symbolic math exercises. So math exercises where they are not required to know 1 or 2 or 3, but they have to lineups, which is a bigger cluster and which is a smaller cluster. So non-symbolic mathematical exercises appropriate for the age 3 and 4. They actually do very well. They do as well as the children in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is full of Harvard brats. Remarkable. Not only that, if you let them play games, their skills improve a lot. So they get very good at non-formal mathematics. And yet, what is striking is that they even though they get much better at this kind of mathematics if you let them play games, if you put in school, these children, if you test them after they were in school, they were no better than children who didn't have that training. So in other words, the teacher, even though these kids were clearly very good at many mathematical operations, the teachers were not making use of it. That's point number one, sad point. Number two, maybe actually in the book, we were puzzled by the fact that if you go to a market in India, you buy, carrots and peas for one is, 60 rupees a kilo, the other is 120 rupees a kilo. You buy 300 grams of one and 500 grams of the other. You ask the guy how much it is. He's an 11-year-old boy. He tells you the amount instantly. You give him the money, he gives you the correct change back. And this experience most of us had. So how could that be? And how could it be that none of these kids can do mathematics? And is it the case that only the talented mathematicians are all in the market, and that's why it's happening? So what's going on? So it turns out that no. We did a study where we sent surveyors disguised as shoppers, and they were just told to do this: go buy 300 grams of carrots and 200 grams of peas, and so they did that, and we find that they're extremely good at the mathematics that they're supposed to do. 95% of the case they get it right, spot on, instantly, without any calculations. Then we went to the equivalent kids in Delhi government schools. The ones these were half of them were dropouts, the others were in school, but marginally. So you go to school, the school kids, you give them the same problem, because we took plastic fruits and vegetables and told them to do the same exercise, and they couldn't do it. They literally couldn't do it. They would be taking pieces of paper, take 10 minutes to calculate the amount of money it takes. Just couldn't do it. So were the wrong kids in the school? No, because if you give them the school math problems, they can do it much better than the children who are in the markets. The children in the markets actually cannot do school mathematics. So it's almost like two brains. There's the same, and this is the most kind of tactile, obvious forms of mathematics they can do. But if you actually, and I did it myself sometimes, I would ask them and I would say, look, if I could do that, I would be in school. So it was really heartrending to hear that. But it was exactly this fact that, in a sense, the school is constructed as a way to convey an algorithm. This algorithm you learn. So I could see them when you give them a division problem, they will try to write down the division problem and then try to put the number, and they don't know whether you start at the right or the left in doing division. So they're trying to put numbers, and I could see them trying to put the numbers down on the piece of paper. The problem was so in other words, they knew. If I asked them to do that, and we actually tested all that, we have a paper in Nature where all of these experiments are described, but we gave them, when you give them kind of connected back to their market problems, they can do much better. But the usual thing is they think of math as being this mysterious algorithm which you have to apply to whatever problem you're given. And then, since they didn't learn the algorithm, they can't do it. The fact that the math is entirely intuitive and that they understand what it is something nobody told them. So I think that's the sense in which I think today we understand much better. Can I take 5 more minutes?
Take your time.
I think I have one last thing. I think we understand much better what it means. This nature of the failure of the education system, I think we understand much better. I think the fact that they literally teach algorithms and not actually ideas or how to think about something. And therefore, if you don't get an algorithm, you feel I haven't learned mathematics, so I'm not capable of mathematics. So in a sense, it destroys not only the kid's chance of learning mathematics, but also the kid's confidence. These are confident calculators in the market, and then you put them in the school, and they feel inadequate. Just skip all that. The last, and probably the idea for which we got most lambasted was the idea that, in a sense, yes, it would be great to press a lever and change the world, but in the meanwhile, we could keep doing small things, and the small things done right matter. Right? That was the idea that I think we got. We got a lot of very nice reviews, but a lot of them at the last line would say, "But these guys are naive. They're too optimistic. You can't really fix the world." And maybe it's true that we can't. I don't know what it means to fix the world. But I think what I would say is that, and that was, so the end of the book was to say, we had a chapter where we said, look, it's still, there's lots of little things that go wrong for no particularly good reason. And it's not because it's a conspiracy of those who are in power or those who are in, the Americans or whoever. There were any number of conspiracies that you can make up to say, the world is going wrong because of this deep reason or that deep reason. And in some ways, we were always arguing, and Esther, I think, gave a lecture where she said, I think of myself as a plumber. I have a problem to fix. The tap is leaking. I'm going to try to fix the leak. So she called us, and she wrote, she has this essay called Economist as Plumber. So in some sense, I feel that I think a lot of evidence since then has accumulated for the view that plumbing actually is useful. So here's an example. We studied in Indonesia. I studied this program called RASKID. It's Indonesia's largest anti-poverty program. It's a food subsidy program, 15 kgs of food at a particular subsidized price. You're supposed to get it. And when we started studying it, people were getting about 35% of the subsidy. Why? Because they were getting overcharged for the rice and not given as much rice as they should have got. So it turned out this program has been going on for, I think, 13 years. So you think that they would know what they're entitled to. But it turned out they didn't. So talk of one small thing, we gave them a card. The card said, this is your name, this is that you're entitled to subsidized rice, this is how much rice you're entitled to, this is the price. Give it to them, the whole package, they start to get about 70% of the subsidy. Rather than 30%, they get 70%. That's a huge change. That's many, 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 many millions of dollars which were going to the wrong person, going to the right person. And in some sense, I say that, so that's what the card looked like with different information. And there was really, and if you do the extra effort, you can get even more benefit. If you actually go around the village and announce the list of people who are beneficiaries, you put it up in the village, you get even bigger benefits. So in other words, it's not that this solves all problems of Indonesia, alas. But I think it's easy to sit on one's hand and say that the world is too hard. that we are, every battle is too big a battle. There's too many powers aligned against us. So, well, I guess we don't particularly. There's no point in trying. We persuaded the Indonesian government actually scaled this up in 2013. So we are so then everybody in Indonesia now has these cards. So they're with their name and all the information on it, and so it sort of and there was it's not that some people were obviously upset that some people were stealing this, but they didn't complain, or didn't complain so much that the government couldn't do it. So it happened. It changed the nature of the anti-poverty programs in Indonesia. So to end, I want to say that I think it's. I think we have. I think as economists, we can take one of two stands. One, we can say, if this problem is not solved and I see a solution, it must be wrong. Because if it were a solution, it would have been already solved. You laugh, but I've heard that argument any number of times, including from people who should know better. But the other view is that, in fact, the world is like in everything else. There's tons of inertia. Lots of people don't think about things. We are always kind of too busy to think about the details of every single program, and that there is therefore lots of scope for, even within this, I think sometimes very dismal political world we have, there is enormous change for scope for change if we actually have the patience and the determination to get to the bottom of these problems. And I think the thing that, as I said, we in poor economics we got some things wrong, some things right, many things we didn't understand as well as we do. But I think this process of making guesses, trying to solve problems, trying to sort of learn from what the data has said after we try to solve them, I think is really almost the only tool we have. So we might as well use it. Thank you.
Is this, you can hear me? Or, hi Arjun. Hey. Should I take this back or is this live?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, just take it. That's okay. So Abhijit has very kindly agreed to take some questions, but before I just get to that, I'd like to thank our two partners for this event. One is India House Foundation, and the other one is India Spora. And they both would like to take a minute or two to tell you what they do. So Nida Hassan will speak about it for India House Foundation. Nida, you want to go first? And meanwhile, I'll make sure that Papa is...
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. Wonderful too.
Thank you.
Are you cold? Should we get your shawl?
No, I'm good.
I have my jacket actually. If I wanted, I could get it. Thank you.
Thank you, Anu. Thank you, Dr. Abhijit. That was really interesting and left me with like a lot of things that I I've been thinking about for a while, and our cities and turning it into policy and what effect this has. And I think it's important for us to start questioning our own work, and the fact that you've done that and it's been incredible. And so thank you so much. My name is Nida Hassan. I'm the Executive Director of India House Foundation, which is a diaspora-led platform advancing truth, democracy, and human rights in India by mobilizing Indian Americans for collective action. The reason we started this is because we did a survey of Indian Americans, and we found that over half of Indian Americans believed that growing censorship in India was threatening its democratic foundations, and yet many felt isolated, fearful, and without really a safe space to speak out. And there wasn't really a trusted platform that brings together concerned diaspora voices and channels them into meaningful civic engagement. The Indian diaspora in the US holds a very significant cultural, economic, and political influence. Indian Americans, as all of you know, are amongst the most educated and affluent communities in the country. They shape public discourse, fund charitable and political causes, and often serve as informal ambassadors for India abroad. Yet, this power remains largely untapped when it comes to defending democratic values and human rights in India. And that's the gap that India House is trying to fill by activating this latent potential that the community has by providing infrastructure, narrative tools, and a visible platform for collective, credible, and courageous action. So please find me. I'd love to talk to you more about this. This is something that we can't do alone. It's a community organization, and we want to have more and more of you be a part of it. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Anu and Thomas, for hosting us all today, and thank you all for being here. I think we've all had a phenomenal intellectual feast in the lecture that we just heard, so I'll keep it really brief. Who is Indiaspora? Why are we interested in being part of an evening like this? Indiaspora is a community of global leaders of Indian origin coming together to tackle the biggest problems of our times in some ways. We all know the success story of the Indian diaspora: star academics, CEOs, actors, public policy makers. And then there are these big questions of our times: poverty alleviation, climate, AI for social impact. And how do we connect these? How do we as a collective community work towards answers? That's what we are keen to foster, a platform that allows for these kinds of connections and conversations to happen. When Abhijit repeatedly made the point that small steps matter, we don't know how to fix the world, but we have to try. And by talking with each other and having economists influence policy, we work to make things that create impact, collective impact. And rather than individual success where there's purposeful effort for collective impact, that's the world we all work towards. And that's the platform that Indiaspora is creating. And it was a no-brainer when the opportunity came up to partner with UC Santa Cruz to have this be a conversation. We are delighted to spotlight these kinds of ideas-driven exchanges because we think that like-minded people coming together and having these conversations where all the answers lie to the biggest questions of our time. It's easy to sit on our hands and feel demoralized, but that's not purposeful or relevant. And so happy to have been part of this evening, and it was lovely to have you all here. Thank you very much.
So if there are questions from, there are questions, then I think there are mics. Someone, and you just raise your hand. Oh, Arjun has a question, so I can see him there.
Yeah.
Oh, he has the
So
mic. He got the mic. Okay, that's Arjun Malhotra, one of the founders of this lecture series. Okay. Arjun, can you come in the light here?
Okay.
Come forward.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question. We talk about giving microcredit loans. Why don't we give them equity? We give equity to anyone who starts a company. Why aren't we giving those people equity so they don't have to pay the interest? They can actually make the money and pay back the loan if they ever pay it back, or the equity.
The reason is, as you know, equity requires measurement of profits or revenue streams, and all of that is extremely difficult. So that's why, especially with small enterprises. So basically, the reason we don't give the equity is because we don't trust them to report their profits. And the loans have this one nice feature that you don't care what's happening to them as long as they pay it back. And that's the, I think I've spent lots of time talking to bankers, and I think that's the standard opinion, at least.
Yeah, but don't you think they should change it to equity?
It's difficult. I do think that measuring profits is difficult. And I mean, having done that for years, I would say it is going, if you're running a small business which is half, the inflows and outflows, some of them go into your household, so, the money comes in, the money goes out, keeping track of cash is difficult. So I would like to think that there are businesses which could be served with equity, but the smallest businesses, I can imagine it being difficult.
I see a hand there. Okay.
Yeah, good evening, Abhijit. You talked about asset transfer schemes in Bangladesh, and that was being run by some NGOs. I don't know whether this thing ever crossed your mind about the asset transfer scheme which India implemented way back in 80s, IRDP, Integrated Rural Development Program. I don't know whether that was post-evaluated or whether it was it gave some reports and results like you got in Bangladesh or not.
There were evaluations. I wouldn't say they were the most credible evaluations. I tell you something, evidence I was giving you was actually not from Bangladesh. The evidence was from India, and in fact, we had a randomized control trial in Bihar, where the what's it called, the Jivika implemented this same program. Jivika implemented the same program. Jivika is the government's, I guess, livelihood program. Exactly, livelihood program. That's the word I was looking for. So livelihood program, and we have the results now. They're spectacular. They're actually spectacular. It's a randomized control trial covering, I think, 100,000 families. So very large, very credible one, and they have spectacular results.
You're speaking, that was a very serious civil servant from the
I
state of
know.
Bihar.
That's why I said Bihar.
Yeah.
The example was not randomly chosen.
Okay.
So I'm actually very curious to find out if there's any microfinance banks that have figured out how to give money to people that actually are already entrepreneurial.
No, it's an interesting question. There's actually a very interesting study, and it won't directly answer your question, but I tell you, but I think it makes it, problematizes it even more. So the study, what they did was they asked people in the neighborhood, who among your group is a good entrepreneur? And they structured it, it's slightly involved, but in ways that to make, so that you don't have an incentive to say it's me. Because you get a reward if everybody else agrees with your assessment, then you get a reward. So therefore, if everybody else, that everybody else thinks you're an idiot, you are not going to say it. So fine. So they got a ranking, and they put people in the 3 bins. People who are mostly ranked in the top third, middle third, bottom third. Then they gave a random subset of those people in the bottom third, middle third, and top third $100 equivalent in rupees as a grant. And then they estimate the effect of that on earnings. So in the bottom third, the estimated effect is 0%. In the top third, it is 30% per month. Or 20 to 30, the confidence band is 20 to 30% per month. The middle one is 10 to 15% per month. So first 10 to 15% per month is spectacular. 20 to 13% a month. If anybody gets an investment opportunity, it's your break for life. So these are, the amount of heterogeneity there is massive among existing, these are all existing businesses. So I think what I have, and they have tried to work with some, I think, banks in Chile to try to see if they can implement some version of this. But I haven't seen any bank really trusting this evidence enough to act on it.
Well, the thing is, if that works, then those top third is also producing more jobs, so the impact is actually much larger.
All of that's true, but I haven't seen any bank willing to use a kind of a screening rule to actually give their loans.
Sharmi, that's Sharmishta, and she works at NASA, and her husband Raja Guha Thakurta, who's right there, is a professor of astrophysics at UC Santa Cruz, and that's how I know her. So go ahead.
Thanks, but I am a molecular biologist, so my question is completely not from an economics perspective. But a related question that I had is, in the example that you gave where folks were given money, to buy trinkets, or they were given a cows, and some training, and then 17 years later or 14 years later, whatever, there was a statistically significant jump in their income.
18 months later, we tracked it for 17 years. It continues to be there 17 years.
17 years later. So in that group, in that study, were the initial people you selected on the basis of their interest in having a business?
No.
Or completely randomized?
Completely randomized.
Oh, very interesting. Okay. Thanks.
So,
Oh, Barry? Oh, in the front, Kristen. Barry has a question. Barry Slater is my longtime physician
yeah, so,
and very good friend.
Hi, thank you.
And an author, and a writer, and a playwright, and much else.
That's why I wanted to ask this question, so I could have that introduction. So I am in the medical profession for many years, and analogous to your experience, evidence-based medicine has come in and really changed the way we treat patients. And but in the course of our randomized controlled studies, they're blinded and they're crossed over, which means that not only do you randomize the selections of the people, but in order to reduce the bias, the people doing the studies don't know. And then at some point you cross over, and then the data is looked at. I'm just curious, is there, it statistically becomes more and more valid as you become more and more rigorous about it. And I'm just wondering what you, in terms of your study.
So, it's not, so the thing that's very difficult to do is to, if you're evaluating the effect of a government program, it's hard to give people a placebo, and there is no such thing as a placebo. So it is always the case that people, often it's comparison of different programs, you get this program or that program. So in that sense, it's not double blind, it cannot be. We sort of, on the other hand, in terms of protecting the integrity, the thing that's, I think, people will do for most of the critical results is to pre-register a whole a slew of procedural steps. So to basically give the author no control over anything. So you assign the treatment, you write down these are the treated 10,000, those are the untreated 10,000, and from then on it's all public. So people, if they want to, challenge the result, you can always redo the analysis. So that's the usual protocol that's adopted.
Jaya, okay.
So I have
Jaya Chatterjee.
Yeah, I have a very simple question actually, and I may have missed it. What's the definition of poor? Because Mongolia
And Bangladesh, I'm sure the poverty is,
No,
or the
it's
so I just kind of wanted to be
there
clear.
are lots of national definitions. We've sort of maybe because we leave out countries like the US where that would be irrelevant, we mostly have been able to function with the kind of the World Bank's definition, which has changed over time, but it's a fixed amount of money in all countries at purchasing power parity, so corrected for domestic difference in domestic prices. So it's always uniform. That's the World Bank's standard definition, and that's what we have used typically. And it's not. I think it does make a big difference if you started including the U.S. There you will find no one under the World Bank's poverty line, extreme poverty line. But for the countries we study, I don't think there is a. I think there's many other, political and aspirational reasons to set different poverty lines. But in terms of the kind of the descriptive, to make the descriptions relatively simple, I think it makes sense to have a single one.
Anyone else, or should we go and have tea and dessert? And you can continue to engage. Oh, here I say Rakesh.
So can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but you can even better with the mic.
So just putting together Arjun's question about equity and that example you gave about the top third and the middle third and the bottom third, you did say that the top third had a 20-30% per month return, right? So in some sense, you're quantifying this, right? So why can you not give that top
You can
third equity?
quantify, but if you're doing a study, you can spend, $20 per head to measure their outcome. Whereas some of these businesses are making $20 per head. That's the problem. If I'm doing a study, I don't care about the measurement cost, because it's a one-time knowledge generation effort.
Right.
So that's why.
But if you could cumulatively give that, if it was large enough, if you could cumulatively give that outperforming third equity.
You could, but I think the question of equity is always about, the person who's giving you the equity is thinking, what will I collect on? Will he report the returns truthfully to me? So if he gets bigger, I think the real answer to that question is, some of these people could be 10 times bigger easily, and then you could give them equity. And that's I think that because then, the $20 you measure is going to be just a small part of their earnings, and then everything would work.
Just curious.
No, it's a good question.
Okay. Oh, here's another one. Oh, but I'm sorry, I didn't see. Okay. Oh, Shramana. Sorry, the light is right in my
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Hi,
Abhijit, I think the answer to the question of Arjun and Rakesh is that if you give equity, you have to give return on investment on that equity. And the margins are so thin, there's no dividend return and there's no exit. So equity is of no value.
I actually don't. I think the answer I gave is I do believe in what I said. I think some of these people, as I said, they have high returns on the small amount of equity. I don't think that's quite the issue. The issue is really that equity relies on somebody certifying profits. That's what equity works on. Equity works on the fact that somebody says your company's profits is 10 million, and then if I have 1% of that, I get 100,000. But if I don't know how much you make, then how do I know? I think that's first order.
Arjun is back with a vengeance.
No. Someone brought up the equity problem. Technically, you're taking the risk by giving the loan as a microcredit. All you're saying is, give me the interest. If you don't give me the interest, then I know something's wrong. Right?
Yeah.
So my point is, in the old Indian system, they had a khata where all you did was, if you were cash positive, you're doing okay, which bottom line is the way you should do accounting, not the P&L that they put artificially on it.
Totally.
Right. So khata, everyone in the village can put together, and equity gets that return on khata.
The khata gives you some flow measure, but it doesn't give you profits. I mean, I worked with those khatas a lot. You will computing the profits from that is it requires 100 assumptions.
Yeah, but profit is a very artificial.
I don't disagree, but equity.
If you're generating cash, why are you worried about profit? You are profit.
Because I don't know what I'm getting 5% of what. I'm holding 5% of this company. Okay.
Well, another, Ashok. All right.
Abhijit, the studies that you do, all these studies that you do they include a human element? I mean, people who actually not just give money, but give guidance and care about it. You know, I was in Andhra Pradesh, and there was a secretary there who's an agricultural guy, but he's also into women's poverty reduction programs, and he went into these villages with us, and they would all get together, the ladies would all stand up, do a little prayer. Then he went from home to home trying to get things going. He was trying to do non-fertilizer agriculture in Andhra Pradesh. Maybe you know him, his name is Vijay Thalam. He used to work for the AP government. But his personal touch was amazing to see, that it made a huge difference, not just the money in an impersonal program and profits and gains, but this guy really cared about poverty. So I just wonder if that kind of thing can be included in any of these studies.
In a sense, maybe I want to. So I absolutely don't disagree that it makes a difference. I think that part of what we want is things which I would have said that, if I wanted that, I want him to design a curriculum for training AP government employees to reproduce that behavior. I don't want one-off things. There's no point evaluating something that's unique to a human being. What you evaluate is what can be done by you invented it, but I can do it. That's the nature of, I think, the value of evaluation comes precisely from reproducibility. And so, in that sense, if you told me the guy there, this secretary then set up a program for training his employees to be more humanly connected to the beneficiaries, I would say that's wonderful, very interesting. Let's evaluate that. But it's not. It's the reproducibility that's key in all of that.
He did exactly that. He had actually created 100,000 what he called pracharaks, which were there to go from farm to farm to farm. And it was a very, very scalable effort he created.
Yes. So I would say that evaluating that. Yeah.
Kristen is giving me, but Abhijit is going to be around through that masala chai and dessert. So please engage with him. I'm sorry, I know there was a question, but I've been getting cues from Kristen for a while that last question. But Chancellor, I think we might have I've never seen a Maitra lecture in which there's such a lot of engagement with the audience and the speaker. So thank you. It's been absolutely wonderful. And so we might have a new format. We might have a new format for the Maitra lectures, and you started it.
Thank you very much.
Every year here. Thank you so much, Abhijit. Wonderful.